Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for attending our SRI workshop for 2024. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for everybody to go ahead and move in or log on to the webinar. And once we get started, we'll have Joanna, the section chief for AMC occupancy here at HCD, and she'll start the presentation for us.
I think we've got some more folks that are still joining us, so we'll give them just a minute here before we get started. Okay, it's so good to see everyone. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to HCD's 2025 Schedule of Rental Income Workshop. I'm Joanna Nguyen, the section chief overseeing our asset management and compliance occupancy section. Thank you again to those who are joining us this year for the annual SRI workshop and to everyone who are joining us for the first time. I'd actually like to take a second just to also introduce my team who is with me today, and you'll be able to hear from them in a little bit here shortly. Our program manager, Van Nguyen, our specialist, George Rodine, Catherine Jones, Tina Johnson, and our compliance resolution specialist, Jonathan Lockwood. We've recently completed our 2024 monitoring site visits, and as we prepare for the 2025 schedule of rental income submittals, our goal for today's workshop is to share the updates, changes, highlights that have been made to the SRI, which also incorporates suggestions from our sponsors. We obviously value your feedback and wanted to make sure that we incorporate all of those suggestions that we received from you all here, and that's going to be seen in our updates and the changes that we've made. We continue to develop the consolidated SRI form for all HCD programs to assist with your reporting, and currently we have 30 plus programs. We'll walk you through the process of completing the SRI from the perspective of a sponsor and various programs by live demonstration. So the first session of the afternoon, HCD will go over examples of home, AHSC, NPLH, and VHIP programs. The second part of our afternoon will focus on the legacy programs, such as our RHCP bond, our CHRP program, as well as LPRs. So we do have a lot that is packed into this afternoon's workshop. And with that, I'd like to, again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and we'll turn it over to our senior specialist, George Rodine.
Hello, everybody. My name is George Rodine. I'm the developer of the SRI workbook. I want to cover some of the recent changes to the workbook and enhancements and so on and so forth. A little bit about the SRI, consolidated SRI workbook. It's used for roughly 30 of the HCD programs. Many years back, we combined 5 different occupancy schedules into one so that customers and staff only need to learn and submit one form. We modified the radio buttons to drop down selections recently. A little bit easier, a little bit more, works a lot better that way. I've updated the macros for row, column, and worksheet hiding and unhiding, and I've added a macro to prevent users from copying and pasting, which causes a lot of glitches and corruption of the workbook. I've edited cell comments and added data validation. So like when you click on a cell, you'll see the instructions. That's what we call data validation. There's still some cell comments which are indicated with a little red triangle in the cell as you mouse over the cell. I've added the following 2024 income and or rent limit data, the MHP family or MTSP income and rent limits, the state median income and rent limits, the home income and rent limits, HCD's policies divisions, official state income limits, HLCP county rent limits for existing housing units, PRP and LPR rent limits. And then the consumer price index was updated for the legacy programs, which includes FHDP, RHCP, CHIRP, SARA, SERP, CalDAP, and DPRLP. So now, as far as the recent changes, I've kind of highlighted them here in purple, the cells. So we've updated the website reference for where the form can be downloaded. And so there's a hyperlink there. Always go to the website when you complete a new SRI, so you make sure you have the latest version. We've added a fourth regulatory agreement field. Some of our projects now contain 4 of the HCD funding sources, so there's room to add another contract number. When you do enter a contract number, always enter a 4-digit number at the end. So like, here's an example. You wouldn't enter 03 home 99. You'd enter 03 home with two leading zeros there. So it's a 4-digit, at least a 4-digit contract number. We've added the city field here. We've added a second sponsor name in the SRI. And what we're looking at for a sponsor here is the UMR definition of sponsor on who controls the project. So if you want to learn what we're asking for in the UMR here, it's the UMR 8301S definition, which includes the general partners that control typically a limited partnership, or if it's just a corporation borrower, it'd be just the corporation. But now, if one of the general partners is an LLC or special purpose entity, you'd probably want to give us who controls that special purpose entity per UMR section 8313.2. Other changes, we've added total units in here, so we can when we do a consolidation, we can figure out all the total number of units in our portfolio. We've added the requirement that you submit a housing authority current utility allowance chart. So that's in both sections C and D. D is if you have an additional utility allowance or more than one utility allowance. I've auto-populated some of the fields in rows 33. You can see in purple here, rows 33 through 45, where in the past you had to manually enter data into those fields. Now they're auto-populated. And then we've added down here in row 69, whether or not HCD, after the review, determines there's compliance issues in a project. And that's for negative points. So we're keeping track of that at the front end here. One of the other big changes that we made to worksheet 1 was we moved this MHP income and rent limit data onto a separate worksheet. In the past, we had a separate worksheet, but the information was also on the front. So it saved us real estate. So if you have an MHP project, you're going to have to fill out this MHP family income and rent limit data worksheet in between worksheets 1 and 2. So that the other changes were on worksheet 2. In column D, we've added a blue shading for FHDP and RHCP projects if they are over-occupied. So if you see a blue shading, that indicates that the unit is over-occupied. Yellow shading in column D indicates the unit is under-occupied. One of the other things we added was functionality for the LPR and the PRP programs. In column K, AM, and AN, it calculates those rents. In the past, you had to fill out a separate LPR worksheet, and so you no longer have to do that. So the other thing is we have this shading here in columns AA through AN. And if you see a cell shaded, that indicates which income limits or rent limits are applicable to your projects. Oftentimes you have if there's 2 or 3 regulatory agreements, there's a bunch of income and rent limits for each of the program rules and the way they calculate income and rent limits. And so this will tell you which is the maximum or more restrictive that we're going to be using in monitoring your project. I did skip over a little bit on this sheet. We did add additional programs in here in row 16. We added, let's see, what did we add? We added HLCP and the ACC program, which is the California Housing Accelerator program. And then if you indicate yes in A16 here, it will turn, it will require you to complete A17 through A19 to be more specific. In other words, if you select LPR, those LPR columns will show up on worksheet 2. If you select PRP, the applicable worksheet columns, worksheet 2 columns will appear, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much the scope and the breadth of the changes. And I got to thank the staff here that gives me input on lessons learned on how we can enhance the SRI each year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Van.
Great, thank you, George. Just want to go ahead and share my screen again. I have this information on here. As George has mentioned, there's a few highlights that we wanted to go over, and George has done so fantastically. So we're going to move on to the next part of our webinar today, and that would be going over a blank SRI, where to locate it, how to download it, and then allow it to work properly. As you can see, I have my website, our HCD website, NA site HCD, but we actually want to go to the hcd.ca.gov. This is the public's website, and as you navigate on this page to locate every single document that AMC, occupancy, and fiscal uses, you want to make sure that you roll the mouse over grants and funding, move on down to reporting and compliance, select that. And as you can see, this page basically houses every single document that's needed for compliance. What we're going to be working on today is the schedule of rental income, the SRI. Please always locate this form here and select this hyperlink to obtain the most recent updated SRI. The current one we're going to be using today is September 4th, 2024. What you want to do is you want to download a copy. You can't use it off of here, off of the website itself, because it wouldn't be able to work properly. So I've already downloaded the file. Select download. I have an example of one already. But once you download, there's an important step that you must go through before you actually are able to use the form. Okay, once you download, you want to go ahead and right select, go to properties, look down towards the bottom that has the security settings. You want to unblock it to allow the macros to work. Okay, once you set apply, click OK, and so this form will be open, and all the macros that are associated with this particular blank SRI should allow you to use the form completely. Okay, so here we have a copy of the most recent updated SRI, which is again September 4th, 2024. I just wanted to do a quick rundown exactly all the fields and what type of formatting for that particular field, so that we can set up the form properly and enter the required information to get an approved SRI. Most of the information that's on this form is very self-explanatory. One of the biggest changes that we've done in the past, as George had mentioned, is combined about 5 different forms into one, which allows us to review and approve the most restrictive rent increases for every program that's related or that's housed under HCD. So very important. It's defaulted at 1. But you want to make sure you select the corresponding number of programs, HCD programs, that you have for every particular project. If you select more than one, another window will open here. As you can see in row 8, a second RA has opened up. If you select anything more than that, other windows will open up for you. As George has mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you can to enter the correct information, and you'll also get some help with these very helpful prompts right here. There's also an instructions page. Sometimes some of us actually forget about that, but you can always go to the instructions page, which will give you a better idea of exactly what type of information is required. Okay, going back to the checklist and certification tab. Now, we want to make sure that we name the property or identify which project you are talking about. So please put the department's names project here. It can be any project that you have in your portfolio. Just make sure that you have it saved properly and emailed to amcbranch@hcd.ca.gov. Now, you want to make sure you select, again, the number of programs or RAs on the property. George has actually added the city, but the important information that you want to select is the county. By selecting the proper county, you'll be able to have the correct income and rent limits for that particular project. Okay, so as we go down, you have the sponsor name. This is the name of the borrower or the sponsor. Then you also have the property management company if you so happen to have one that manages your property. It's very important that you have the preparer's information here. Thereby, we can, myself, my reps, the fiscal and occupancy reps, can contact the person who filled out this form and ask any type of questions that may need following up on. Okay. This current fiscal reporting year would be 2025, so that's already defaulted. You can fill it out for the past years as well, but 2025 is defaulted. Please be aware that you want to select the proper reporting period by selecting the drop down here. For the most part, it'll be a January to December 1st reporting period. If it's a fiscal year, which would be July 1st to June 30th, please select accordingly. George has also entered the total number of units. Now, please keep in mind, this is the total number of units for the entire property, not just the number of units at your particular, that have your particular loan program associated with. Okay, so please enter the total there. Now, once you select once you enter the total, you want to select the proper loan program. For the most part, this one is an MHP type of selection, and it's very important to select and use the drop down. If that's the particular program that you're going to be working with, then please select so. If not, then you want to go ahead and select no for every single one that does not apply. Okay. And in doing so, it'll allow the form to work properly. And if you don't select the correct one that are associated with your particular program, then you won't get the windows that will be needed to complete the form. As an example, this one's an MHP but if I were to select, let me take a look here, FHDP or TERP-R, that's the only way the proper window will actually open up for us, okay? Moving down. Now, we also want to make sure that you've actually reviewed the forms that you're submitting to us. And so we've added a section for you to certify that the information that you have is up to date and correct. Make sure you complete this part of the form. If not, we may return this back to you, asking more questions and asking you for you to certify that information as well. You have the certified type. Once you've completed the form, you can send it over to us at amcbranch.ca.gov. And the person who's actually certifying this can be the borrower, the sponsor, or the management agent, depending on the agreement. Let's just say that it's the borrower or the sponsor. Please enter that person's name, their title, and very important, the date by which they certify the information that's being submitted. Now, if you don't enter a date here, it can definitely affect the form and the recertification dates by which I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, okay? And then please provide a phone number and an email so that we can contact you should there be any further questions that we need to follow up on. Everything in green here that you see is set for the HCD rep or myself or anybody at HCD to complete and fill out. It's very important that you guys take the time out to look at the notes that we provided to you. There's going to be additional instructions put here so that you can either complete it or follow up with additional information if required. Moving on to the second form. This is the information form where it has to do with all the tenants, every single person that actually is residing at your particular property. What I'd like to do is just run through it really quick. A lot of it is very self-explanatory, but there's a few mistakes that are made every single year that we want to make sure that we point out again. Column A, the unit number, that's pretty self-explanatory. Unit B, or column B, that's the manager's unit. If it is a manager's unit, all you have to do is select the drop down and that'll select it for you, okay? Household ID, one of the most important things that we do is verify that the tenants are actually the same tenants from last year or the previous ones or the ones that moved in, right? And so we want to make sure we identify those particular tenants with a unique household ID. Please understand you cannot use the tenant's name or social security number. Column D would be the number of persons in the household. Use the drop down if you can, please. And then the next one is the unit size number. It can be a single room occupancy, group home, or a 5-bedroom unit. Please select the drop down. Column F is the move-in date. Very self-explanatory. Column G is the household income recertification date. Now, HCD requires that you recertify the tenant's income once every year or once every 12 months. This information needs to be updated and inputted here. If you do not enter a recertification date here, let's just say this is 10/31/24. That takes into account that date that it was recertified, and it will highlight yellow if it's beyond 12 months from this date of 10/31. Please keep that in mind. And then once you recertify the tenants, you'll determine the annual household income. Please enter that information here. It is a numerical value, so it'll show it as a dollar amount. Okay. The current monthly rent and the number of rents, the number of months at the current rent for the reporting period. This is very confusing to some. The reason being, it is all depending upon the reporting period. Now, this is a drop down, and you'll see that it goes from 0 to 12. And just a quick explanation actually of what that column is for. Depending on the number or the month by which you're looking to increase the rents, you want to select the correlating number of months that you want to still have the current rent at. For example, if the tenant is currently paying $100 today or this month, let's just say in December, and you don't plan on increasing their rents until February, then they would remain at 1 month, which is January, at the current rent, and then February, their rent will increase at the new proposed amount. Okay. If you plan on not changing the tenant's rent at all, then you want to select 12. However, if you want to increase the tenant's rent right at the reporting period, which is January, then you want to go ahead and select 0. Okay. The next column is column K. Depending on the program that you belong with or that you have, you may need to be to enter the rent amount here. Otherwise, for the most part, for MHP like programs, you could leave it as blank. The next 4 columns are just information that we want to keep track of. So if they apply, go ahead and select the drop down and select X. If they don't, you can just leave that alone. Moving on to the accessibility units. This is very important for us to keep track of all the units that are actually at the property, and if they are mobility units, sensory units, or both or neither. Just go ahead and select the drop down, and once you do, you want to make sure that you answer the question whether the unit is actually being used for that purpose or not. If it is, just select yes, and then not applicable. If it is not, let's just say that one is sensory and it's not being used for that purpose, you want to make sure that the tenant is aware that they may need to vacate the unit and allow and be moved to another unit that is not sensory. And then you also want to make sure that they sign some sort of documentation to verify that they actually understand that requirement. Okay. We will have to check with the person who submits the form, that we, as in the occupancy compliance reps, will have to reach out to you if you do not fill out this form. And if anything, we don't get an answer, we may not be able to approve the scheduled rental income submitted. Okay. And the next area would be the designated program type. there's a large drop down. Please select the one that actually applies to your loan or your project and select the proper AMI levels. Everything in white will be self-populated and generated through the macros. Column AS is a very important column for you guys to fill out. This is the rent that's going to be that you're looking to charge the tenants the following reporting year, okay, or looking to collect. Let's just say they're currently paying 500, but now you want to charge 600. You can enter that information here, and it'll give you the change in difference, okay? Anything highlighted yellow, and in the examples that we'll follow up with, will be something that we have to address or you have to address to explain. In this case, it shows that it's being overcharged or it's not allowable, okay? And then you also have the subsidy in column AT. If there's any type of subsidies that the particular tenant receives, please enter that amount here. Please enter that any new amounts that they received should it change. If it's the same, just enter the same amount. Column AV has the subsidy type, okay? Now there's a large drop down that you can select from, be it either the project type of subsidy or individual unit type subsidy. Please select the one that applies. Column AW and AX is left for the occupancy reps to select and verify that we can approve their amounts. So once we select and understand that the rents that are being charged are correct, then we can go ahead and send that back to you, showing you the amounts. It's very important that you pay attention to this column because that's the approved amounts. Anything that pops in yellow is something that we need to make sure that we address as reps. And then if the amounts or if the columns are yellow, it's best for you to please provide explanations as to why the compliance issue is yellow in this cell right here. So take a look here. All right, and then we're moving on to the next one. Tab 3 would be the managers or non-restricted units and managers unit tab. This is basically for market rate units, or if it's assisted by somebody else, you can put that information here, okay? Now, please understand it's going to be an average amount. So if you have 5 one-bedroom units, you want to go ahead and make sure you enter 5 here. And we understand that the rents can vary from all 5 units. Just total them up and divide it by 5, and you get the average. And please enter that amount here. Okay, so let's just say it's $1,000 a month. Enter that information. If there's a manager's unit, please enter that here. If it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, doesn't matter. Just go ahead and enter the manager's unit here, and then we'll have that information depending on the value that's attributed to this manager's unit. If it's given any type of value, put that amount here. We can go over the exact amount later in the examples following. And here you have the pivot table that will basically provide a rundown of all the units and what type and AMI levels, okay? Our examples will be able to give you a better idea of how this is useful. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and transfer or allow my compatriot, Jonathan Lockwood, to be able to share his example. And that would be the HCD and Home example. Take it away, Jonathan.
Perfect. Thank you, Van. So as Van mentioned, I'm going to be going over an example SRI that has a project with both AHSC and Home funding. So we will get right into it. So reviewing Section A, we do have the correct number of regulatory agreements. The information is filled out. The correct RA numbers are in there. The only issue I'm seeing here is that the phone number is missing. So that is something that could delay the approval of your SRI. So it is really important to make sure you fill out all the yellow cells in the first tab. So sorry about that. Moving on to Section B. You'll see the HCD funding for the project. As I mentioned earlier, this project has AHSC and Home funding. That is on the same row here, and it is selected yes, so that is correct. And then it does not have any other HCD funding, so no is selected for the rest of them, which again is correct. Moving on to Section C here, we have our utility allowance chart. This project has only one group of utility allowances, so Section C is the only required section to be filled out, not Section D. I do want to show you too some of the documentation that we require to be submitted to verify the amounts. We do have the amounts entered in here for 1 through 4 bedrooms. And this is an example of a document, or what a document would look like to verify those amounts. So we see that it came from the Housing Authority. We see that we have information for 1 through 4 bedrooms. We have the specific amounts highlighted. And then on the bottom, we have the summation of each item for each bedroom number. So looking at the numbers here and going back to the SRI, those amounts match up, and so we're good to go. Moving on down to the checklist of required items, as Van mentioned before, you do need to select an option for these. So reviewing this, again, this could delay your SRI approval if you do not select an option in these cells. And then if you were to select no for any of these, then you would have to explain your answers in the yellow cell here. So moving on to the certification, again, I'm seeing issues that could delay an approval. We do not have a phone number or an email, but the rest does look good. And then, as Van mentioned, this HCD approval here is just for HCD use. And again, I want to stress that it is very important to review the HCD comments when you do get your SRI approval back. Okay, moving on to the next tab. So the information you input here will give you your income and rent limits for the rest of the sheet. So it is very important that this is done accurately. It does ask you a few questions here, like if it's a tax credit project. It will ask for your place in service date. For this one, that is 3/17/09. And then it also asks for the supporting documentation, which is the IRS form 8609. And just to show an example of what that would look like, this is the documentation that we would receive for something like this. We see it's form 8609, and we see the place in service date of 3/17/09, which again is correct. Moving on down, we have the gross rent floor date here, and the supporting documentation for that is the TCAT carryover allocation agreement. And again, I can show you an example of what that looks like. So we have the agreement here, and it is dated 12/21/09, which again is correct. So since all of that information is correct and we have the correct county entered onto the first tab, you will get your income and rent limits here on the bottom of the page. Okay, so moving on to tab 2. This is a pretty standard example of something that we would get. Upon reviewing it, we have our unit numbers here. We have the manager unit is correctly identified using the drop down, which is great. Our household IDs, they are unique for each one. They do not have first or last names in them. So again, those look good. Our first issue here, our first yellow cells arise in the number of persons in household. So as you can see here, we've got 3 people in a 3-bedroom unit, which per the UMRs would be underoccupied, which is why this cell is highlighted. I did want to point out as well on unit number 15 here, we've got a 1-bedroom with 8 people in it. And that's just to show that while we do have minimums, we do not have maximum occupancy requirements. So moving on to our household income research dates, you will see that all of these cells are highlighted, and that is because they are more than 12 months away from the recertification date on the first tab. I do want to point out that, like Van said, these household income recertifications are due every 12 months, and so therefore, if we see yellow here, we will not approve an SRI. Our next yellow cells we see here are for annual household income. These are highlighted yellow because these people are over, or this household is over income per their AMI designation. Just show you an example. So we have, based on the 45% AMI we have entered for the first unit here, the annual household income limit would be $79,065. And since this is over that, it's highlighted yellow. We have our current monthly tenant rent here, no yellow highlights, which is good. That means nobody's currently being overcharged. And then we arrive at our number of months at current rent per report period. So looking at this, I can see we've got our current rent in here. And then if we go over to our proposed new monthly tenant rent, we have no change in rent requested. So since that is the case, this number should be 12 because they're going to be at their current monthly tenant rent for the next 12 months. And then one more item I wanted to point out in regards to this was for vacant units. We do not have a number entered in here for current monthly tenant rent, which is correct because the unit is vacant, but we do want to get somewhat of a projection of what's going to be happening with that unit. So with that being said, the 0 here is correct, but we do want a proposed monthly tenant rent here. And then the number of months at the current rent should be an estimation of when the unit will be leased. So for example, if the unit is vacant, but you expect it to be leased in February, then they would be, this number would be 1 because they would be at that $0 rent for 1 month before charging rent to a new household in February. So moving on to accessibility, columns P, Q, and R all have to do with accessibility units. And seeing here on the first tab or the first row, this unit is designated as a sensory unit. The household living in the unit does need the features, but it is also indicating that yes, there is a transfer agreement for them to move. So this is something that your rep would question because since the household living in the unit needs the features of the unit, there shouldn't be a transfer agreement. Moving down to the third unit here, we have a mobility designation. We see that the household living in the unit does need the accessible unit, but there's nothing here. So again, this is something that we would question. This should just be NA. And then the last one for this section I'm going to go over is this unit here. So it is designated as a mobility unit. The household living in the unit does not need the mobility features, but there is also no agreement for the household to move. So this is again something that we would have to have a conversation about because that household would be required to have a transfer agreement in place just in case someone did come lease a unit at the property and did need those mobility features. So moving on again. Van went through, unit designations. This project does have both AHSC and Home, and since that is the case, there will be 2 rows for unit designations, 1 for AHSC and 1 for Home. Again, this is auto-populated, and our next yellow cell here you will see is for our proposed new monthly tenant rent. So for this unit specifically, based off of the AMI level and the utility allowance, is this rent increase is not allowable. You'll see here that the maximum allowable monthly net rent for this unit is $1,416, and there is a proposed increase of about $600, which brings them to a level that we would not approve.
$900, sorry.
Yes. So the next few columns again are just the subsidy information, which Van went over, and then I do want to show you. I know he clicked on it, but we'll go ahead and do it again. When we're reviewing and we approve the rent amounts, we click that check button, and you will see the approved rent amounts for each unit. I did just want to point out here, you'll see for this unit specifically that we talked about earlier, the maximum is approved at $1,416, and this would not be allowable. Okay. The last thing that I want to touch on this sheet is the explanation of compliance issues. If there is any highlighted yellow for any unit number, there needs to be an explanation in here as to why that is. The explanation does need to be detailed and thorough. So for example, if somebody was living in an underoccupied unit and the note was just that there's an occupancy exception form on file, we would not accept that. We would have to have, the reason for the occupancy exception as well. So again, it does need to be very detailed and thorough as far as explanations go. That is it for tab 2. So we will move on to tab 3 here. So this is the non-restricted units. This property only has one non-restricted unit, and it is the manager's unit. Did want to point out that this number here, so if the free rent of any of the on-site employees is included in the project operating expenses, this number needs to match line item 6331 on the proposed budget. But this looks good. And so moving on to tab 4A, depending on how many regulatory agreements you have will dictate the amount of tables you have. But again, this is just a summary of what is on tab 2. It shows you the designations of the units, the bedroom numbers, and the AMI levels for each one. And then I also wanted to point out too, this will be blank until you refresh it. So on cell A7, if you right click and refresh, that will create this table essentially. Moving on to 4B. Again, it's the same table. It's just that this one is for home instead of AHSC. And then one more tool I wanted to show you too is that if you wanted to get rid of the blanks, you can click on the arrow here, uncheck the blank, and it makes the form look a little bit cleaner. So with that being said, that is it for my review, and I will pass over to Tina.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am going to go over sorry about that. I didn't unmic myself. Share my screen. Okay. So sorry about that. My name is Tina Johnson, and I am going to go over an SRI for our loan programs, MPLH and VHIP. These are two MHP-like type products, but they do range in different areas depending on their guidelines. As you see here, there are 2 regulatory agreements. So however, as stated previously, however many regulatory agreements you have, you need to list it here so it will open the boxes for you to complete the information. And we need all regulatory agreements that you have on this project that are regulated by HCD need to be listed on the SRI. But if you have regulatory agreements from another agency, they do not get listed here. They're only HCD regulatory agreements that get listed here. Again, you need to make sure that all of these yellow boxes are completed. If there is a second sponsor, you can place that here. If there's not, it's okay to leave that section blank, but that is the only one that should be left blank. The total number of units, if you list 60 here, when you go to tab 2 and scroll down to the very bottom, there should be 60 here as well. Those 2 things need to match. If they do not, you need to confirm that you actually have 60 units and make sure that they both match. Again, here, as you see here, we have the MPLH and the VHIP products here. So we mark this box yes, all of the rest are no. You're going to go down here and you're going to enter your utility allowances. And Jonathan showed you an example in his presentation, so I will not do that here. But if you have a TCAC project and you have gotten the utility allowance approved from them, then we will accept that. You wouldn't need to use the PHA utility allowance. I don't have an example of that for, unfortunately, but you can always check with TCAT for that if you don't have a copy. Again, you need to make sure that you complete all of these. And if for some reason you're marking one, no, we need an explanation in here. That could, if you do not answer these questions, we're going to return it to you because we need to know, one, that you just marked the wrong box in error, which can happen, we're human, or you meant to mark it no, and you just forgot to put the explanation. So it's very important that you do that. Again, down here, every yellow box needs to be completed with whatever information for the person who is certifying the document, which means the person who is completing the form, the SRI. On tab 2, as Jonathan went over, this has been moved from tab 1 to tab 2. So you guys need to make, or from this, it's not tab 2, it's just a tab in between 1 and 2. You need to make sure that you go in and fill this out, because if you do not, again, your rent limits and incomes will either not be, it'll be blank, or they'll be incorrect, which could potentially mean we have to kick it back to you and have you complete it. Now, Jonathan showed you a copy of the 8609 and the carryover. So I'm going to give you an example of a certificate of occupancy. In this case, this city uses the inspection record, which is the same as the certificate of occupancy, but it's the final permit date that they sign off. So this is that date, and that is what you're going to want to use on this date here. If these dates are in here and you've listed these two things, when you email the SRI, you need to make sure that you give us the required documents to prove that these dates are correct. So that means you would email the copies to us along with the SRI. That would be the utility allowance, their certificate of occupancy, and your TCAT carryover. So all of this stuff needs to be sent with your SRI, or we will have to email you and request that information, which could hold up your approval of your SRI. So on tab 2, again, you want to list your unit numbers. You want to list that unique household ID for all of your tenants. And you want to list the number of persons, the unit size. Now, anything that is incorrect on this form is going to highlight bright yellow. And what that means is we will need some kind of explanation. If you scroll all the way over to the right, you will see that there's an explanation here. You need to make sure that for every bright yellow highlight that you see here, that there's an explanation in here. Or again, we're going to have to return it to you to get that information completed, and it will hold up your approval. So any over rents, you need to look at those, and if they're highlighted bright yellow, it tells you that they're over the rent limit and that they cannot be. So you need to make the required adjustments. If you do not, the rep will do that. And when they do the approval, for instance, you see here, we're only approving the maximum rent limit. So you're not, even though it says approved, you're not being approved for the higher amount. You're being approved for the max. So you need to make sure, and we will also note on this tab here that what units are being approved for the lower amount of rent. So you need to make sure that you're reading these comments when you get your approved SRI back. So to make sure that if we have approved something at the lower amount, you're going to be aware of it so that when you raise your tenant's rent, you're not increasing it over the amount that they should be. And again, any units, any tenant, any subsidy. Now, if you do not know what the proposed new monthly rent subsidy is, just copy from what they're currently getting over here. Unless you know for sure they will not be receiving the rent subsidy anymore, then you just put a 0. And but if you're not sure, then just copy over the same amount, because it's just an estimate. This is not a snapshot in time. And again, on tab 3, this is, as Van went over, you're going to list. These are only the market rate units. They are not the units that are restricted by another agency. So as you see on tab 2, we have some units over here that are TCAP projects. So you're not going to put the TCAP projects over here. They need to be listed on tab 2. They are a restricted unit, not a non-restricted unit. So what it means by non-restricted is market rate units. So if you have market rate units, you're going to put those here. In this case, this project did not. The manager's unit is always going to be listed on tab 3. And then you're going to do the monthly rent. If you're not charging the manager any rent, you put 0. If you are, that's the amount you put. Now, this amount that you put here must match on the operating budget that you submit to our fiscal department. That amount must match what you put on that operating budget. So if you have an amount on there, make sure you're putting the same amount here. Now, for the units, we have 2 regulatory agreements. So we have a 4A and a 4B. Again, to refresh this, you are going to right click and refresh. You are going to need to match the HCD assisted units to your Exhibit B to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of units, which for HCD would be 16 and 29, and that they're coded at the right AMI level. If they are not, you need to go back to tab 2 and make your adjustments to your AMIs so that they match. So that when you come back and refresh your unit mix, that everything matches your Exhibit B. If you do not make these adjustments, because they will not highlight, unfortunately, they will not highlight in bright yellow. So the rep, when they get it, they will be matching this up towards your regulatory agreement. And if there's anything that's wrong, they will be making the adjustments. And again, they will note that here. So you will, again, very important that you read this information. Now, as you see here, you've got 2 different AMI levels. That cannot happen. The AMI levels must match for both regulatory agreements. So if you have 20% here, this needs to be 20% here. But if you realize, oh, wait, this is a 30% unit, so this one was right, then you are going to go here and you are going to change this one to a 30%. So all of the AMIs down across the board must be the same AMI. You cannot have 2 separate ones. So And again, just go through, match up your unit mixes and make sure that they match. You see here, there's 4A is for your MPLH. And then 4B is your VHIP. And again, if you look on your Exhibit B, which is part of your regulatory agreement, you can see exactly you've got 8 MPLH units at 20%. So you just want to match that up. If you do not, please go back to tab 2 and see what adjustments that you can make. If for some reason you cannot make any adjustments, then that means your project, and we will be noting in here that your project is temporarily out of compliance with the unit mix of your RA. And then you will need to go through, and your next available unit, you will have to make sure you meet the AMI level that you are missing. And with that, I am done with my presentation, so I'm going to hand it back to Van.
Great, thank you, Tina. Looks like we ran a little bit fast. So with that, we can actually take in some questions and possibly answer some more questions through the chat. Okay, give me 1 second here.
A lot of questions.
Okay, so we're gonna open up the Q&A real quick. If you do have a question, please select the raise hands, and then we'll select your hand and allow you to unmute you and allow you to speak. Okay, just to let you guys know again, making sure you guys can hear me. If you do have a question, if you'd like to pose it, please select the raise hand. We'll unmute you and allow you to speak. Okay, we have Samantha Wilcox. Do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm having an issue. I downloaded the blank SRI template, and I've enabled macros following those instructions, but that tab between 1 and 2 is not showing up. Is there something I'm doing wrong?
Yes, I can answer that for you. So depending on the program that you're selecting, you have to make sure that you select the drop down for MHP like. I can actually show you an example right here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So right here, can you see that okay, Samantha?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So to select that, you can see right here, you don't see that tab that we're talking about, right? The MHP tab?
Correct.
Okay. So you want to make sure you go ahead and select yes right here. And bam.
Okay, I did that.
There you go. Voila. So that tab pops up for you now to enter that information that's required.
It's still not showing up for me, but
Still,
yeah, I did that. I had selected
Okay.
yes, and I selected no for the other ones.
Did you happen to unblock in your security settings when you right click on the file in your file folder?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
interesting. That shouldn't have occurred. That should have allowed you to open up that tab.
Try putting in your county.
I did that too. I've been messing around with it. Is there someone I can
So
just email directly?
I would suggest that, yeah, maybe you could. Okay, can you maybe save it to your desktop and then reopen it from your desktop? I think sometimes when you download it and you do all these things, it might make a difference. Are you using an Apple by any chance?
I'm not. No, I'm using a PC.
Okay, Samantha, so what we'll do is if you can, please contact me. I'm Van Nguyen, van.nguyen@hcd.ca.gov, and we'll be able to help you walk through that, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry about that. Any other questions? Looks like we have a question from Agnes.
Yeah, so because our tax credit is all at 45%, but HCD we have 15, 25 or different AMI. But I heard that both column needs to match on the SRI. How are we gonna match that? Which one?
So for your schedule of rental income, you're going to use your HCD regulatory agreement AMI levels. And when you're placing rents on each unit, you want to make sure that you go with the most restrictive out of all of your regulatory agreements. So if it's a HCD restricted unit, you want to use the HCD limits so that it will match up with your unit mix chart from your regulatory agreement. If it's a tax credit unit that has no HCD assistance, you're going to use your tax credit AMIs.
Does that make sense?
So that actually I'm still confused. I'm sorry, because
Sure.
the 15% HCD that they used different occupant standard. If I heard it that
is this what
tax
you mean with-
credit two tables, right? If both line, we're gonna match those AMI.
Sure. Now, Agnes, is this what you're talking about right here, where the two different types of loan programs?
Right.
HSC is 50% and then
Yes.
TCAC happens to be 45%. So what'll end up happening is
Right.
it'll take the most restrictive one.
Okay. So
It'll-
they
it'll-
don't need to
it'll-
have to match. I see.
Right. It won't necessarily have to match in this case.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, we still have a little more time, and if anybody else has any questions.
Christina, I see you have your hand raised, and I see you've also put a question in the chat about reporting dates and periods. Your report dates and periods you can actually find in your regulatory agreement. The schedule of rental income is due 60 days prior to the start of your report year. So let's say your report year was January 1st to December 31st. Your report would be due on November 1st, and it would be for the upcoming year. So your 2025 report in this case would be due November 1st, 2024. And then you had asked about having a 30-day notice. What you want to do is actually plan for your rent increases by putting those on the schedule of rental income, waiting for HCD to approve those rent amounts, and then going ahead with noticing your tenants for any increases that you've had approved. Hopefully that helps, but if not, feel free to chime in.
Then I think we have Wendy. Go ahead, Wendy. Do you have a question?
Oh, thanks. Yes, I didn't know I could unmute myself. On tab 2, the boxes that say elderly, veteran, family, agricultural worker, I assume we only have to check those if they're required by the HCD funding source?
Correct.
Just wanted to check. Thank you.
So basically, if you have a VHIP loan program, any of them that you have designated as a VHIP, you need to be marking the veteran. That goes the same for the elderly or senior and the ag worker. If you have, which is something we did not cover, is our farm worker program. But if you have a farm worker program, then if it's designated a farm worker, then you need to be putting the X in that box. And you can
Okay,
do
yeah.
more than one. So if you're going to basically check the boxes that apply, all that apply.
Okay, I think for us, it's only the ag workers. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
one other thing that we potentially might have missed. When you put in your rent revenues on worksheet 2, it will populate over here under assisted unit rents and non-restricted unit rents. And so the blue shaded cell here will come up with your amounts, rent revenue amounts. Those need to match your operating budget that you're submitting with at the same time you submit your SRI. So check to see if the total revenue amounts match your proposed operating budget. The other thing is on this income, this SRI, this income and rent limit calculator, this can be used if by your team, by your developers or whatever, if they're proposing a project to get an idea what the rents might be on a proposed project. You'd need to put in the county and then, this data in here, the place and service date and the rent floor date. And then you can see what the current income and rent limits might be for a proposed project. Now, generally on these drop downs on the supporting documentation, a lot of it is in your 8609, your IRS form 8609. Sometimes both the rent limit and the placed in service date are on that document. So if you have your 8609, you could submit that with your SRI.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, Justine, I was actually typing you an answer, but in regards to matching the revenue on tab 1 to the operating budget, sometimes the budget can be approved prior to the approval of the SRI. And in that case, your HCD fiscal rep may go in and amend the approved budget to match the SRI. So sometimes that will happen, yes.
Yvonne, the 8609 will not need to be submitted every single year. We should have a copy of it on file once you submit the correct and updated one.
Patricia, you do need to submit the utility allowance chart along with the SRI when you submit it annually.
And only if your tenants actually pay utilities themselves. A lot of the legacy programs for which I'm going to be reviewing or sharing a little bit later do not pay a utility allowance. It's all included in the rent. So no utility allowance or documentation will be needed.
Some of the newer office. Or
This is for
Microsoft.
Barbara. Okay, I'm sorry, George. We're trying to answer Barbara's question. Go ahead, George.
Microsoft has, Apple has made progress in the compatibility with, the PC environment, and so we're seeing better functionality with the Apple. Occasionally, you may run into issues if you have an older Mac. If you do have issues, reach out to us. We can execute the macros for you so that the proper columns and data appear on your worksheet. We'll send it back to you so that you're ready to go to fill in the data. 99% of the time, there's no problem filling in the data. It's just the macros. So if you're having problems executing the macros, reach out to us and let us know the criteria of your project, the funding sources. We can select those yes, no fields for you and get you on your way.
Thank you, George. Any more questions from the attendees? Again, this is Van Wyn. I want to remind everybody once again, the SRI is updated every single year by George, so hopefully he doesn't go anywhere. But
He's
again,
not allowed to go anywhere.
so we want to make sure that you guys always visit our website to download the most updated SRIs, because the information that's included on all the macros that are placed on on our SRI form will be updated, and so it won't show the newest information if you use a previous year's SRI. So if there's no more questions, if nobody has anything else or raise hands, we'll go ahead and allow everybody to break. I think we're going to be starting. Originally, we were supposed to run to 2:45, but we're going to break a little bit earlier. So we're going to give you about 30 minutes to take a break. And if you so choose, you're welcome to come back and attend the second part of our session. That will include the legacy programs, as well as LPR and some information about PRP. If nothing else, you'll dismiss for the day. Otherwise, we'll see you again at 3 o'clock. This meeting will still continue to run. Just pop on in when you come back.